Colorizing a photo is a great project. The first part of making this artwork is going to be on the computer. What we'll do is whatever program that you have on your computer, it really doesn't matter, it can be as simple as just the print preview. You will lighten the photo as much as possible. By lightening the photo, you will create more white spaces in it so that when you're colorizing it, the color will show through. So here on my computer, I just used the adjustment tool and I dragged it to the lightest color possible. Now you'll see the two photos that I printed. The first photo is just a regular printing, and the second one right beside it is how it looks once it was lightened. The lightened version is much better for our project.
Hi everybody, so today our project is colorizing photos. Why would we colorize photos? Well, historically, the first photographs were just black and white. As I work on my color photograph today, I'm going to share some history of photography and why colorizing photos was actually a thing for artists. So what I'm going to use are color pencils. You can also use paint, or you can use felts and markers. It's up to you. It really depends on what you print your photo on. So I printed it on matte paper instead of glossy. If you print on glossy, it's going to be harder to do. So I really recommend printing on matte paper. Okay? Once printed on your matte paper, and we've already talked about how we lighten the image, you are ready to colorize your photo. I don't have the original photo with me on purpose because I want to use my imagination as to what the colors should look like. And it's actually a little bit more historically accurate because, again, historically, you wouldn't have a color photo with you. You'd have to imagine the colors from your mind or from looking at them. So I'm going to imagine them from my mind, partly because I also want to change the colors a little bit. So as an artist, colorizing a photo, you have the opportunity and the option to change the colors to whatever you want them to be. So if you want to have a pink sky and bluegrass, this is your moment to be as creative as you would like with your colorizing of your photo. Alright, so I'm going to use the color pencils today. I feel like that's the best medium for the paper, and that's what I recommend. Now, if anyone knows, the first photographs ever taken were black and white, and then later color photography was developed. So how long a time period was there between black and white photos and color photos? So the answer is about 70 to 100 years. So the first color photos, the first black and white photos were taken in about the 1830s. In fact, there was a man from France who's credited with taking the first photo that was actually held on, that stuck on paper, but people had been experimenting with it in different countries around the world. So that's just the first known one that we had, but I'm sure there was others. So this man took a photo from the second story of his home down towards the street. Now this man was a printmaker by training. He was a printmaking artist. So the way he figured this out is he'd been printmaking, and he started using light-sensitive chemicals in his printmaking development, and that's how he was able to capture and hold those images. Now, by the 1830s, black and white photos were becoming more widely known, and so the black and white photos are becoming more widely known, and so people were wondering, hey, is there a way that we can get these photos in color? So that's when artists teamed up with photographers. There's actually a book written in the 1850s called A Guide to Painting Photographic Portraits, and the writer of that book said, I'll read it to you, he said, "When the photographer has succeeded in obtaining a good likeness, he passes it into the artist's hands, who, with skill and color, give it the lifelike and natural appearance of a color photo." So artists came up with different techniques of how to colorize these black and white photos, kind of like what I'm doing here. So artists could use paint or ink, depending on what they were more comfortable with or what worked better for them. So for about 70 to 100 years, artists were colorizing photos. And in the meantime, scientists and photographers were doing experiments trying to figure out how they could capture color photos. It wasn't until about the 1880s, closer to the 20th century actually, that they started to find ways to use color plates as well as filters, color filters, to develop color photos. So some of you may have had access to a dark room. When I studied photography at Concordia University in Montreal, my first year I took a black and white photography class and I got to use the dark room. But in my second year, I got to learn how to do color printing in the color studios. And that is actually harder. It's a little bit harder to balance the colors when you're developing color film than it is with black and white. So I don't know if you can see this, but I have decided to change the color of my house to purple. Now, like we talked about earlier, the reason I can see the purple is because I printed the photo a little bit lighter. So here I'm coloring over a darker black part and it's not coming out as brightly. And that's okay, it just looks like the shadows there. Alright, my house is now purple, and I'm trying to think of what color trim my purple house will have. How about pink? Why not? Now again, historically, artists were credited with how accurate their renditions could be. But because we are doing this as a project for fun, I would encourage you to be as creative as possible with your colors on your first one. On your second one, you can try to do one that's accurate colors, but just to practice the first time. Important tip is your brush strokes, or in this case, pencil strokes. Those are going to be seen. So something I'm doing is I'm coloring very lightly and gently right now. And I'm going in the same direction. If I change directions, you'll see that in the artwork. And it'll take away from the image because the viewer will be more focused on the direction of the brush strokes than the smoothness of the color. So we're trying to achieve a very smooth look when we do this. We don't want our brush strokes or our pencil strokes to be too evident. So I'm actually using the pencil instead of directly like this, I'm using it sideways and it's very sharp. So I recommend when you're doing this at home to place the pencil sideways and to color lightly. We don't want to press too dark. Now as your artwork comes to life, you might have areas where you'll darken it, but it's easier to darken something than it is to go back and erase once you're using color. So here I'm doing the sky blue lightly, and I'm practicing my nice soft light brush strokes all in the same direction. I'm going horizontally here. Okay, for the trees and the foliage and the grass in my artwork, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colors. I'm going to use different shades of green. I have a really light green, a medium green, and a dark green. I also have a dark blue and some brown. So combining colors to create shades will really help your artwork look more realistic. So shades are very important. You can gather as many different colors of shades of a color to help you create depth and shadows in your artwork. So I'm going to work with these different colors. In the darker areas, I'll use the darkest, In the lighter areas, I'll use the lightest. And in other areas, I'm going to combine the two together to blend them and kind of move them seamlessly from one color to the other. So in the tree, I'm going to start with the lightest green first. And this will capture the highlights. So the whitest parts of your photo are going to show the brightest color. The dark areas where the ink is printed on, the black, darkest areas are not going to pick up as much color. So it's very forgiving when you work with the light color because you can color over the dark areas and it doesn't matter. So you can see here I've started putting the light green in this section here. Now in that same section, I'm going to come back with a little bit of the medium green. Again, your brush strokes are very important. Right now I'm doing vertical lines as well as some kind of, imagine if you're actually drawing leaves. So I'm doing some little hash marks to add some depth. So already with this medium color, I've created more depth. Now I'll come back with the darkest green, and the areas that are black, the darkest black parts of the ink, that's where I'm going to come in with the darkest shade I have here. Now why do I have blue and brown? Well, when you combine dark brown and dark blue with the darkest green, it gives it a weight and it falls into color mixing theory, and it gives it more dimension and full body to your color, to your artwork. So artists, when they were doing this, have to be very aware of color. You can see how many different shades there are in just one color. Rarely is something just one pure color, especially when the light is shining on it. There's always shadows and shades and different temperatures to the color. Okay, so I'm going to keep working on this, but already you can see the different shades are making the tree and the foliage look fuller and more realistic. Markers can also be used to colorize photos, however they won't give it as realistic a feel as using paint or using the color pencils. So if you use markers, this is great for younger artists because it fills up a big area really fast. So here I'm doing the sky blue. Again, if you're using markers, just like you did with color pencils, try to go in the same direction. The other limitation of markers is that you really do see the brush strokes, and it's harder to change between colors. So here I'm trying to do a careful blue behind a tree, but it's a bit hard because it's so delicate and the marker's so strong and bright. So again, if for younger artists, you'll get really strong, bright colors with markers, which is fun, but you won't be able to get the same shades and depth of color that you can get with color pencils. So here's how it's looking so far with markers.